Hello, fourth form. Mr. Falali here. I'm making this video for you, which you should be watching on Thursday, the 2nd of April, 2020. Just to outline what it is that you need to do in your longer writing assignment. Okay, to be clear, we aren't going to be writing our longer writing assignment today. You're going to start that tomorrow. But what we're going to do today is we're going to start to plan what our response to the essay is going to be. And we're primarily going to focus on annotation, on collecting quotations, which we can use in our analytical paragraphs in our essay. But what I want to show you how to do today is show you how to annotate a quotation on a computer, okay? Because of course it's going to look slightly different to how we would normally do it in the classroom. We aren't going to be highlighting words and drawing arrows off of them and forming notes around the quotation, because I don't know how to do that on a computer. You're all young and intelligent and you probably know a way. We don't in the English department, so we thought we'd show you how to do it this way, okay? I also want to talk you through this document. So you should have been given access to the Google Doc that you see on the screen. If you have not, something has gone horribly wrong, but you should have it. I would recommend that you pause this video now and you get that video, that document up on maybe on another tab, just so you can maybe refer to it and you can look through it as I'm talking, okay? Or feel free to open it up after watching this video, all right? So I want to talk you through what this document entails, because it's quite thorough. There's a lot of information. Okay, I'll start from the beginning. So fourth form longer writing assignment. Within this document, you are going to find optional quotations to assist you in answering the question, an electronic copy of an inspector calls in case you want to find your own quotations, a quotation planning grid, which I'm going to talk you through today. And your task today, after watching this video, is going to be to complete your quotation plan in the grid. And there's also some helpful tips to improve your essay, all right? So this is a literature essay. That means you're only going to be answering one question, okay? You're going to be answering one question with an essay. So using analytical paragraphs to answer one question. That question is, how far does Priestley present Mr. Burling as an unlikable character, okay? How far does Priestley present Mr. Burling as an unlikable character? Now, because this is an essay, it's very much, I suppose, subjective, okay? That means you can offer your own opinion. You might say that he presents Mr. Burling as being a totally unlikable character. You might say that there are some redeeming features in Mr. Burling if you see them. It's entirely up to you, okay? Although I imagine most people will be saying that Priestley presents Mr. Burling as a deeply unlikable character, okay? What you want to do, though, in this essay is you want to try and map out the character arc of Mr. Burling. So Mr. Burling's journey, does he change in any way? You might say he does, you might say that he doesn't, okay? Let me talk you through some of the quotations. Now, one thing you're going to notice as you scroll through the document is that we have given you some quotations to try and help you, okay? Some quotations that you might want to use in your essay. We haven't given you an extract, and that's because in your English literature assessment, which you'll be doing next year for your GCSE, they don't actually give you an extract for the inspectacles question. So you are expected to know, to have learnt, to have memorized many an inspectacles quotations that you can then use in your essay, okay? And we wanted to give you some help, some scaffolding, because you are only in fourth form, okay? So we've given you some quotations that you might use. We have not given you an extract because you won't be given an extract in the exam. You will just be given a question like this. How far does Priestley present Mr. Burling? However, you do have an Arthur Burling quotations box with a number of Arthur Burling quotations, which you can feel free to use in this assignment. This is a longer writing assignment. It's not a formal assessment, okay? This isn't going to affect setting in any way. This is just our way of checking to see how much you remember from the play, and also just to remind us of where we need to work on with you in terms of getting those grades higher and higher, okay? If you don't like the idea of using these quotations, or if you feel as though you've got a fairly good understanding of the play, maybe there's a quote in the back of your mind that you're thinking you want to use for Arthur Burling, or maybe you're going to do some research on the internet, you're going to find different quotations, by all means, feel free to use any quotations that you want. You don't need to only use quotations that Mr. Burling says. I mean, apart from the first quotation, which is from the stage directions, I think every single quotation here is dialogue that Mr. Burling says. But you could absolutely use something that the inspector says, or Sheila, or Eric, or Gerald, or Mrs. Burling, not Edna. But you can use quotations from all across the play in this answer, as long as they're relative to Mr. Burling. Okay, don't feel limited to using these quotations. In saying that, I have given, we've put a link just here where it says electronic copy, and that is a copy of the play, an electronic copy of the play. You may also have your books. I know most of you have taken your books home. I would say that they're invaluable, especially any class who, if you're in 4A, for example, we've done some annotations in our books, right? So try and use those annotations. So let me talk you through this next section. So before you go into answering the essay question, which is down here, where it says longer writing assessment, you're given the question again. You're given a success criteria, which is to try and write a minimum of 4 analytical paragraphs. Aim to include the following in each paragraph, and this is just a reminder of the ingredients that need to be in a literature paragraph. So a clear point at the beginning of each paragraph, which relates to the question. A quotation to support your point, some analysis, so for example, single word analysis, authorial intent, so what the writer is doing and why they're doing it, but also, and what makes this slightly different to English language, because this is literature, you also want to include some social or historical context. It's asking quite a lot of you, so what we have done is we've created a planning section. Okay, so on Friday you're going to tackle this question here. We're going to ignore that completely today, and we are just going to plan. We're going to plan some context, and we are going to plan our quotations. So your quotation plan looks like this. It says quote 1, quote 2, quote 3, and quote 4, and then it says annotation ideas. What you need to do today is you need to find 4 quotations that you're going to use in your assessment. I shouldn't say assessment. My goodness, in your assignment. It's not an assessment, it's an assignment. And you're going to put them down here. And then you're going to annotate these quotations. Now, I'm not asking you to write your entire analysis in this box. No, we're just planning, okay? So you can write here in note form like this. You don't need to write in full sentences, okay? But what I'm going to challenge you to do is to try and be as perceptive as you can in exploring your quotations. Zoom in on the key words in your quotations and try and explain them to the best of your ability, okay? When you write a paragraph like this, an analytical paragraph, you should find that your point is only going to be 1 or 2 sentences, and your quotation is just going to be 1 sentence. It's going to be 1 quotation. The longest part of your paragraph is going to be your analysis, okay, your explanation of your quotation, okay, along with your context, your AO3. So that means that we want to try and unpack those quotations as thoroughly as we can, okay. I'm going to show you how to do that. That's the primary purpose of this video. I'm going to show you how to annotate a quotation on a document like this, because of course it's going to look different to how we would normally annotate. So I am going to pick one of these quotations. I'm going to pick, it has nothing whatever to do with this wretched girl's suicide. And I'm just going to take the benefit. Well, one of the benefits of being on a computer is we can just copy and paste. So my first quotation's here. I am just going to copy and paste it like that. So where it says quote 1, I have my first quotation. Next, before I start to write my annotation ideas down, I'm going to highlight the words that I'm going to annotate. Okay, so I'm going to highlight wretched, and I'm going to highlight suicide, and I'm also going to highlight nothing whatever. So that one didn't go well. Hang on, bear with me. Okay, look again. So now I've highlighted the words that I'm going to zoom in on, okay? And now I'm going to focus on my annotation ideas. Now, notice how I'm going to do this in note form, and there's certain things I'm going to be looking to do, okay? I'm going to be looking to define words that I feel need a definition. I'm going to be trying to identify word types or techniques. What I mean by that is it might not be that you're identifying an adjective or a noun. It might be that you're identifying a simile, for example, like when Mr. Burling says mixed up like bees in a hive. That would be a simile. And then I'm going to try and talk about connotations that words have, or associations that words have, and I'm going to try and talk about what effect these words have. Okay, so the fact that J.B. Priestley has Arthur Burling say wretched, this wretched girl's suicide, what effect does that have? Okay, so let me start with the word wretched. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write the word down, and I'm going to identify the type of word it is. Okay, it's an adjective. Can I spell adjective? Mr. Flawley's challenge of the day. Yes. Okay, so I've got my first word that I'm going to zoom in on, wretched, and I've got the word type, which is adjective. If you don't know what the word type is of the particular word that you're zooming in on, Google's your friend. You know, if you've got internet access, then just Google whatever word you're looking for. Let's say, for example, it was jolly. Just Google jolly definition. So Google that, and it will tell you the definition, but it will also tell you what word type it is, okay? So wretched is an adjective, and next I'm going to unpack its meaning. To be wretched is to be deeply unpleasant or unlikable. If something is wretched, it's deeply unpleasant or it's deeply unlikable, okay? It's quite an emotive word, so I'm going to write emotive word. I'm going to write deeply unpleasant or unlikable. What else can I say about the word wretched? Well, I can link it, I suppose, to the idea, to the context, okay? So here, Burling is speaking to the inspector about Eva Smith, having learned she has committed suicide that day. I think this is really important, okay? It's useful to add this in our annotation because it says a lot about Mr. Burling as a human being, okay? So he describes Eva Smith as being wretched in a conversation in which he learns that this girl, this young woman, this employee of his that he knew, that he'd interacted with, that she's taken her own life, okay? So Burling is speaking to the inspector about Eva Smith, having learnt that she's committed suicide that day. So you would say that this word, the effect, well, I suppose I would word it like this. It suggests, or it demonstrates how callous Mr. Burling is. I'm going to break this down to 2 points. So first, it demonstrates how callous Mr. Burling is. To be callous is to be deeply insensitive or deeply unemotional. Okay, if you're unusually insensitive, then you're described as being callous. Now, Mr. Burling's being unusually insensitive here because he's using a word, an adjective, wretched, which means to be deeply unpleasant, to describe a young person who's just committed suicide. Okay, so he demonstrates how callous Mr. Burling is, and the reason why he's doing that is because he's demonstrating how callous Mr. Burling is, but he is also, in turn, he is showing how callous capitalism is, because Mr. B is a symbol for capitalism, okay? He is callous and he is selfish because he is the embodiment of capitalism. For those of you who don't know what that means, if you embody something, it means that you act out those particular traits, okay? So he is the physical representation, the physical manifestation of capitalism. And because J.B. Priestley felt that capitalism was an entirely selfish political philosophy, and that it was quite a callous philosophy because it's all about succeeding, trying to win and trying to look after yourself, to win in this game of life, and seeing everything as being a competition. So therefore, you need to win, but if you win, others are going to lose. Because he felt that that was inherently quite callous and quite uncaring and uncooperative, he makes Mr. Burling say these awful things, okay? Because it's almost as though if you could take the idea of capitalism and you could turn it into a person, that's what Mr. Burling is supposed to be, okay? So what do we have so far? Wretched is an adjective. Its meaning is to be deeply unpleasant or unlikable. It's definitely an emotive word. And Burling is speaking to the inspector about Eva Smith here, having learnt that she's committed suicide that day. So that demonstrates how callous Mr. Burling is. And in turn, he is showing I'll write priestly rather than he. Priestly is showing how callous capitalism is, because Mr. B is a symbol for capitalism, and he is the embodiment of capitalism. Notice again, I'm not writing in full sentences because this is just note form, okay? Then I'm going to zoom in on the word suicide, okay? Now, of course, suicide is a noun. I wouldn't necessarily want to zoom in. You don't necessarily have to note that it's a noun. But what you would talk about, perhaps, is that there's a contrast between the a gravity between the, how can we word this? What I want to say is there's a real contrast between the imagery that is evoked in the word suicide, okay, you know, what it means to commit suicide, and to then use the adjective wretched to describe someone. It would be very uncommon and unusual, and frankly very callous, to hear someone describe someone's suicide as wretched, or to describe someone who's committed suicide as being wretched. They aren't two words you would normally hear in the same sentence, you know, wretched girl's suicide. One word that you might often hear, for example, would be a word like the poor, you know, the poor girl's suicide, but you wouldn't necessarily hear the wretched girl's suicide. So I'm going to try and word that into sentences. So I'm going to say there's a contrast between the emotive imagery of the word suicide and the adjective wretched. It highlights how unusually cruel and selfish Mr. Burling is. If I wanted to add an AO3 comment, another AO3 comment, which would be a contextual point, if I wanted to step away from the characters and think about J.B. Priestley's message and what these characters represent, okay, I'm not just thinking now about what the characters say, but I'm thinking about why they say them in relation to J.B. Priestley's message to the audience. I would say that at this point, the audience will regard, well, might regard, you never know what the audience would have thought, but at this point, the audience might regard Mr. B as being irredeemable. If someone's irredeemable, it means, you know, you can't redeem yourself. So you've said something that's so awful that the audience, if they were undecided on whether or not you were a terrible person, they're probably quite sure of it now. You can think of this as being very similar structurally to when Charles Dickens has Ebenezer Scrooge say they'd better do it and decrease the surplus population. Now that's interesting because there is a similar link there in imagery to death and perhaps even suicide. You know, Scrooge says if they would rather die, then they'd better do it and decrease the surplus population. Here Arthur Burling says it has nothing whatever to do with this wretched girl's suicide. Okay, so this is something that if you as an audience member you weren't sure about whether you liked or disliked Mr. Burling, at this point a lot of people would probably be completely turned off by him, okay, and realise that he is a terrible person, but more importantly that capitalism is a terrible ideology, that the J.B. Priestley creates this character Arthur Burling who has these dreadful views, and the reason he does that, the reason that he has Arthur Burling say these awful things, is because he's trying to assassinate his character in the eyes of the audience. The audience is supposed to greatly dislike Arthur Burling because he is the embodiment of capitalism. So it's almost as though if you don't like Arthur Burling, then you can't like capitalism, because J.B. Priestley's trying to say they're the same thing, you know. He embodies all of those capitalistic principles. So there's some annotation for you. I would also just add nothing whatever. The fact that he says that he has nothing whatever to do with the wretched girl's suicide, I would just say again that this highlights his lack of social responsibility. His lack of social responsibility. Okay, he accepts no blame and is unwilling to consider his own he accepts not blame, he accepts no blame or guilt. That's far more, I wanted to condense that slightly because we're not writing the essay here, we're just taking some notes, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read this to you one more time, and then I'm going to set you off to complete your task. Go away. Aha. So the quote is, "It has nothing whatever to do with this wretched girl's suicide." I've highlighted the words, the key words that I'm going to zoom in on. And then my annotation ideas are as follows. So wretched is an adjective and its meaning is to be deeply unpleasant or unlikable. It's a very emotive word. Burling is speaking to the inspector about Eva Smith, having learnt that she's committed suicide that day, and this demonstrates how callous Mr. Burling is. In turn, Priestley is showing how callous capitalism is. Mr. Burling is a symbol for capitalism, and he embodies capitalism. Then we have the word suicide, which is a noun. There's a contrast between the emotive imagery of the word suicide and the adjective wretched. It highlights how unusually cruel and selfish Mr. Burling is. A contextual point would be that at this point the audience might regard Mr. B as being irredeemable, and in turn may reject capitalism. Also, when he says he accepts nothing whatever, that his actions are nothing whatever to do, it highlights his lack of social responsibility. He accepts no blame or guilt. What I would like you to do for today is I'd like you to find 4 of your own quotations, add them to this quotation plan, and add your own annotation ideas. Okay, do this to the best of your ability. That may be as much writing as I've done. It might be more writing than I've done. Okay, but it might be that you write slightly less. As long as you're writing to the best of your ability, that's absolutely fine. Okay, you need to make sure that by Friday, by tomorrow, when you come to writing your assessment, that you have this plan filled out, okay? Because it will help you to write your analytical paragraphs. Tomorrow, before you start writing your assignment, I'm going to show you one more video, and that's going to detail how to turn your annotation into an analytical paragraph, okay? So hopefully by the time you've seen this video and you've done your plan and you've watched tomorrow's video, you'll feel slightly more equipped to actually tackle this task, okay? There is also a context plan. It says, use the box below to plan any AO3 context points that you will include in your assignment. This includes anything which may be relevant to Arthur Burling and J.B. Priestley's message to the audience. If you think that you might find this fairly tricky, use the sentence starters, okay? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sentence starters. Feel free to just use those, okay? But I challenge you to also try and add your own thoughts if you can think of any, okay? An example of context would be anything to do with the fact that Arthur Burling is a symbol for capitalism, what J.B. Priestley thought about capitalism, the fact that J.B. Priestley was a socialist, what J.B. Priestley's message in the play was, why he makes Arthur Burling a dislikable person, okay? Anything like that would be a contextual point. Any reference at all to Edwardian society, if you use the word Edwardian, or if you use the word class, you are talking about context, okay? An example would be Arthur Burling as a symbol for the callous, selfish, materialistic Edwardian middle class. And then there are some sentence starters, okay? Finish this box, complete this box, fill this in. Make sure that you absolutely, by the end of today, that you fill this plan in, okay? 4 quotations, 4 pieces of annotation. And then tomorrow we will start the assignment, and I will talk you through the success criteria, and I will talk you through all of this. It looks quite wordy, don't worry, it's all there to help you. You don't have to use all of this, but it will greatly improve your response. I will talk you through all of this tomorrow, okay? Your task now is to find 4 quotations, to annotate them, to fill in this section. If you manage to do that relatively quickly, then move on to your context plan, okay, and try and finish these sentences. Add any additional information if you'd like to, okay. Okay, 4th form, that's enough from me. 24 minutes, well, I never. You're probably tired of hearing my voice. Okay, I wish you all the best. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to get in contact with me, any of the English teachers, and we would be happy to help you. I'm going now. Goodbye.